Hey guys, so I want to do a quick demonstration about how the Mishimoto intake system goes on the Z. Now, that's not something new, but there's a little bit something different with that, of course, because I have installed the AMS intake system on my Z, but using the Mishimoto boxes. There it is on the passenger side. Now I have gone ahead and removed the setup on the driver's side because there was a little bit, if you've seen the video, about what needed to happen to tweak that a little bit. Just the mass airflow housing had to sit a little bit different onto the tube to get that to work exactly right, to get that in there, and then for it to bolt up exactly how it needed to be. So I know that, looks a little bit awkward, but the angle just had to be a little bit different to make that work. The way that the mass airflow goes into the box where it meets is a little bit different for the AMS versus the Mishimoto. The AMS system comes in pretty much directly underneath the boxes. The Mishimoto comes in at an angle. With that, it made it a little bit tricky. So what that means is that if I am going to then turn around and sell the Mishimoto intake piping, which is brand new, how to combine that then with the AMS boxes, that makes it a little trickier, I think. But that's what I'm going to demonstrate right now, is whether or not that is doable. Currently right here, AMS box, Mishimoto filter on the Mishimoto mass airflow and piping. So I just went ahead and assembled that. I'm not putting any clamps on this. I do want things to fit loose, and this would be similar to what I would do installing the intake setup to start with. So I'm going to see how this goes into the car and what issues arise. Again, with the AMS box wanting to sit more straight, the issue is going to be, I'm afraid, that pipe is too short. So me using the AMS piping and being too long, I can kind of accommodate that and messing with the angle. But if it's too short, I'm not sure that's as easily resolved. Let's see what we can get into. All right, so I went ahead and took the box and the filter off just to demonstrate what I'm talking about here with the angle. And so with the Mishimoto box, this is how that mass airflow housing would come in at an angle. So one of the things that has to be taken into consideration is the bracket. I'm going to try to hold this with one hand, but I know it's going to be hard to see. Now I've got it misaligned, but that bracket is actually going to line up with that hole when this is set in place. So I know everything is not exactly lined up. Again, I'm trying to hold it with one hand. So once I hold it with two hands, there we go. Now we can get it to zoom in there. Once I can get aligned, and there we go. So now I've got it. Of course, everything's going to get thrown off because it's not bolted together, but the inside, the MAF housing, is going to be angled. So what does that mean? Well, let's talk about that, because somebody's going to say, oh, well, that's not sealed. Well, it's not sealed. AMS isn't sealed to begin with. To start, let's talk about this big hole over here in the corner. Now that's for a drain, but if you're worried about these little gaps here in the bottom, well, talk about the elephant in the room, right? So that, there wasn't a perfect seal to begin with, even right here. So even though there's a lid on the box, there's still that opening pulling warm air from the engine bay. Now, is that primarily where it's going to get air? No, but my point is, these small gaps around here are not significant. And you know, again, there's even a hole right there in that corner, another drain. So now I'm not holding that perfectly there. It's moved everything, but you know, that's not going to be an issue. And actually, the gap, some of that gap around that mass airflow housing is going to be sealed up when I put the filter on. So you're not really able to see it, but there's the filter on there. And I'm holding it here because I want to keep that as lined up as I can. I know it's not entirely perfect. And then there is underneath. I know it's tight in there, so it's hard to tell, but there's not a large gap. It actually fits on there pretty good. Now the only question is, does the lid fit? So let's try that. So I need 2 hands in place. That, again, I wanted to hold that in place, demonstrate that the bolt holes line up, and everything is exactly where it needs to be. So the mass airflow housing comes into the box a little bit more than the AMS setup. Actually, in some ways, I think that the piping and the way that the filter goes on the mass airflow housing actually works a lot more effectively with the AMS boxes than the AMS piping with the Mishimoto boxes. But there you go. Anybody wanting to do that, mix up those setups. So if one person wants to run the Mishimoto plumbing and AMS boxes and somebody else wants the Mishimoto boxes and AMS plumbing, there you go. You guys can swap that out. Actually, that's even going to stay in place, just to demonstrate that it is on that turbo properly. I just, again, don't have a clamp. And then there it is on the mass airflow housing. And there it is within about a 1/4 inch of where it would bolt up. I knew from the beginning that there's going to be a lot of people who don't like this, and that's fine. So it's just options. And a lot of people are going to argue, does it even make a difference? Maybe not, but it's what I wanted. I wanted the AMS piping, and I wanted the Mishimoto boxes. I wanted the dry flow filters. And so if there's somebody who doesn't care about having the oiled filters, and you know, the AMS boxes are great, they're attractive looking. You can remove the windows and, you know, I think get a little bit of noise there. I don't think near as much as the Mishimoto, but you know, you can still do that. That's an option. And so you can blend those setups either way. Anybody looking for a Mishimoto setup and willing to run that with the AMS boxes, well, there you go. The setup for the passenger side ought to be a lot easier, because I compared the piping from the turbo to the box, and actually the AMS and Mishimoto were nearly identical. So this side ought to go on without a hitch. This side was the one I was concerned about, because that pipe, that connector was so much shorter than the AMS version. That was the one I thought there'd be issues with, but clearly that can be made to work without a problem. I'd run it for sure, but I prefer having that open box, and that's what I'm going to do. Me and my little AEM pre-filters.